Hello, my name is Kai, and I am a bit of a rambler. I like to travel, learn, and tell stories. And I am in Peru. Officially been here a few days. A lot has happened in the 4 days or whatever that I've been here so far. When I was on the airplane and the airplane landed, it was a short flight. The pilot said something. Oh, that was really interesting. They speak Quechua here. So they did the informative messages in Cusco in Quechua first, and then in Spanish, and then English. And I didn't realize how prevalent Quechua was that people would be speaking it up here so regularly. But when he said something, everyone on the plane clapped, but my Spanish wasn't good enough, so I didn't understand what he was saying. But that was a cool little introduction to the country to realize that Quechua was spoken fairly regularly here. You know, I have this Peruvian hat that I bought from a World Crafts store in Golden, Colorado, just in the shopping mall, and it is from Peru. I don't know if you're familiar with those stores, but they just import crafts from all over, and this one's heavy on alpaca wool and, handcrafts from South America and Central American countries. And I've had this Peruvian hat now for a long time, probably like 5 years or something, and I always wore it in cold climates, and it's so comfortable. And I still have it, but I can't really wear it in Peru because the sun is so killer here that there's no brim on the Peruvian hat. It's just like to keep you warm, and I'm not usually going out at night too much. So I'm just out during the day. And if I wore that hat, my whole face would be cooked. I'd have to apply sunscreen like every 20 minutes or something. You can feel it. It definitely feels like, I don't know, Hawaii sun or... Because of the elevation, Peru's UV index is just about the worst in the world. I am a pale person, and I'm in like the highest UV index in the world as far as populated towns go. Oh yeah, because I'm in Cusco, Peru, so I'm living here for probably a month, maybe 2, I'm not sure yet. It's 11,200 feet here on average, and I've already climbed a couple mountains, another 100 feet up or 200. But 11,200 feet is almost exactly double, actually it's like exactly double the height of Denver, which I lived at for a while. And then the last town I was in, Medellin, is also at 5,600 feet. The only thing, I like that it's cooler here. I've been getting too warm. I've been in too many tropical places lately, and I need to get my heat down. And I figured it's going to be colder at 11,000 feet, which is crazy. It's just a crazy height. Like, I don't know what percentage of the world lives over 11,000 feet, but it's got to be less than 1%, like way, way less. And I like it. I like Cusco in general. And it is a small town, and it's in such a remote, high elevation location that there's not a ton of people here, and it just feels local. It feels like the northeastern parts of China that I was in, like Jiamusi, where people just lived in their town and there wasn't this huge connection to the rest of the world, really. They're just in their own little pocket. And here they're so high elevation, it's their own little pocket of heaven. But it feels like Peru, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It feels so local and isolated that I kind of identified with it right away because I'm usually traveling by myself and I want to absorb the local culture wherever I go. And this town, it's very easy to absorb the local culture because there isn't a lot of non-local culture. It's all local. The food is very Peruvian. The clothes are Peruvian. All the snacks are Peruvian. So it is exactly the kind of place I like to visit. So I guess I should start out with altitude sickness because that's the huge concern of everything. Like every single Airbnb listing, every tour guide, or every article I read about people who visit Peru talk about the altitude sickness and warn against it really stringently, severely. And so I was kind of worried about it, and I did jog more than normal when I was in Medellin because I figured, well, heck, it is at 5,600 feet. So if I'm going to go to double that, at least if I jog every day while I'm in Medellin, that should help somewhat with the altitude sickness, or rather my altitude adjustment, because I figured I would be able to adjust. I go up and down in elevation so often traveling that I figured my body would get it pretty quickly. And so in Medellin, I was jogging at least 1 hour a day, and very often closer to 2 hours a day. And if I wasn't jogging, I was walking for way more, 4 more hours a day. I just like walking around getting food, so that's what I was doing all the time in Medellin. And, I should mention, I ripped my pocket that I have that one big back pocket that I've sewn onto my jacket so that I can put my luggage in there so I don't have to buy carry-on or check the luggage. I can just put the extra stuff into my jacket and then take it on, but I ripped the pocket, my back pocket that I sewed on there, so I'm going to have to sew on a new one. And there was fabric I saw yesterday, and I was staring at it. I was like, why do I want that fabric? And I couldn't remember. And then I got home, and I was like, I was going to repair the pocket. But whatever. I'll figure it out. I just have to find like a discarded umbrella, which I think I actually saw yesterday also. Jeez, I got to pay attention. Anyway, I got to Peru without paying for luggage because of my jacket luggage. And yeah, I was worried about altitude sickness when I landed because I also had a 7-hour layover in Lima. So I was flying for 6 hours? That's not right, is it? 3 hours. I was flying for 3.5 hours from Medellin, Colombia, which is 5,600 feet, down to Lima, which is basically 0 feet. It's right at sea level. And then staying there for 7 hours for my layover, and then 1.5 hours, and then I was in Cusco, Peru, which is 11,200 feet. So 5,600 is already pretty high. Some people get altitude sickness there. But 11,000 is pretty much everybody apparently is at high risk for altitude sickness. So when I landed, I was like, looking around like, am I okay? Is things okay? But I don't know. I felt fine. So my main concern became getting data on my phone. And at least in Lima, the data scene is freaking crazy. They don't have any kiosks for the companies, Claro, Bitel, Entel, like the local companies. They only have, I think, a government-sponsored or some centrally located telecommunications business called Peru SIM. And they wanted, I think it was 90 was the cheapest, 90 soles. So like $25 for 1 gigabyte for 7 days. It was like some ridiculous thing. And then if you wanted anything resembling normal for a month, it was 150 soles. So almost $50 for, this is like 10 gigabytes for 30 days. It was just so much money. I couldn't believe it. The most expensive one was $65 US. I was like, something's wrong. So I just didn't get the Peru SIM at the airport, even though in a lot of countries that's become just as easy and cheap to get as if you go into town. But something that seemed wrong. That seemed like too much. So I hung out in the airport for a little while because it was still really early, 6:30. I told my Airbnb that I was going to check in closer to 11 a.m. And so first I just looked like, where do I go? And I have my offline maps and my Airbnb location tagged on that before I came over. And I was pretty close. I was like a 90-minute walk away, if that, from the front exit of the airport. And it was so early, and it was still cool outside, like it was not too hot. And the sun didn't even feel too bad. And of course, I have my, a bucket hat. So I decided to just go out walking. But for some reason, I was really concerned about data. Like, I really wanted to get my phone card. And so I picked up a tourist map from the map kiosk, like free maps at the airport. And she told me where I could get the Claro information, like the main telecom companies, their main centers that I could go to. But all of those telecom companies were in the opposite direction of where I was going. And there wasn't much on Google and there wasn't much on my offline maps. There were a couple that were closer on my offline maps. So I decided to try go to those. But as soon as I left the airport, literally across the street, there was an authorized reseller of SIM cards. And I was like, oh, great, because that was one of the actual companies. I could probably get a better deal there. And there was a lady selling breakfast pastries and whatever outside. And she said they all showed up at 7 a.m. So I waited around for 20 minutes because it was like 6:56 or something. And she says they're usually open at 7. But I waited for 20 minutes and nobody showed up. And I was kind of antsy because the air was so clear and crisp and you could breathe in the elevation. I could breathe in the elevation like, I don't know, it was very interesting. It felt exotic, maybe because of the less oxygen in the air, but it just felt like a different new location. The same way that when I got to a new location when I first started traveling, I was like, new. Whereas a lot of these places like Medellin or Panama, they feel like cities. Cusco feels like a town rather than just another Western city. This feels like a Peruvian locale. But anyway, I talked to that lady a little bit. Oh, and that's been really cool. I can speak better Spanish now. I started studying using a new app called Tobo, which I'm not sure how AI supplemented it is, but it feels pretty practical, and there are 4 very simple games to practice vocabulary and some phrases. So I'm enjoying using it more than, I liked Duolingo before, and then it went completely AI and seemed totally useless for me. But Tobo looks to be filling in that niche. And just practicing, even if I'm not learning all the new words or whatever, even if I just practice, when I talk to people, it's better. I can understand them better and they can understand me better. So it wasn't so cold outside. Oh, I didn't get the Claro SIM card because they didn't open after 20 minutes. And I just decided to start walking to the Airbnb. And then I used one of those spots on my offline maps. There looked like another Claro store. And I started walking to there also, which wasn't in the same direction, but it was still only 7:20 a.m. or something. And I wasn't checking in until 11 a.m. So I just started walking because, it felt so new. It just felt like a fun town to walk around. And I didn't like that people do beep more here than in other countries. Like in Medellin, nobody beeped. And then in Cusco, it seems like a lot of people honk their horns and beep their car horns. But I have my earplugs and my podcast, so I just listened to podcasts and walked around. And immediately there were like 4 more stores. And I asked them all for telecom stuff. And those ones didn't have SIM cards, and it was still too early, so most of them weren't open. But I just kept walking around. By 8 a.m., a bunch of places were open that had SIM cards to sell for normal prices, for like $1 for the SIM card and then $10 a month or whatever. And I kept walking around. It's like, well, okay, well, this is great. And I still don't know why I was so worried about data, but for some reason, just this time when I landed in Cusco, it's like, I need to make sure I'm connected. So I decided, even though there were smaller companies, the one I had used in Guatemala that was so good, and I think even in Panama or another country, was Claro. And so I figured there's a mall that's an hour and a half away, but it's still really early. I'll just walk up there for an hour and a half, get it from the official Claro center in a mall. And then by the time I get up there, they'll be open. I can get my card, and then it'll take me another hour and a half to get to my Airbnb. And then, I'll be checked in. I'll have my data and everything. And then I realized it had been like an hour plus already of walking around with my rucksack on, all the weight, and I felt totally fine. There was no indication of altitude sickness at all. I felt okay. So I started ambling my way toward this mall, the Real Plaza, and I went down a side street because it seemed nicer, less traffic. And it was a good street, and there were a bunch of places advertising SIM cards, but it was still only 8:30 and they all opened at 9. But I found one old lady who had just opened her shop, and I asked her if I could buy a SIM card. She's like, "Oh yeah, of course." And she gave me BTEL and how much, and she was like 90, which is a lot still for the relative wealth of the country. Like most countries that don't have that much money, it's not going to be $25 for a month for a SIM card. But that was okay to me, and I liked this old lady, and she gave me interesting information, was very helpful when I asked her when things opened. And she even told me, like, well, I don't have Claro. Claro's right down the street, though. If you just wait until 9, they'll be open. But I was already in my hiking mode, and I just wanted to keep backpacking around the city. I was like, okay, thank you very much. Because 90 was still a little high, and I was already pretty close to like the main tourist street, and I had to exchange money also because I had all my Colombian pesos and I need to transfer everything to soles. So I thanked her very much and kept walking, and I was still like, wow, 90. And she told me too, like everywhere is 90 soles per month. Everything's going to be 25 to 30 US dollars per month for like 10 gigabytes of data. And that's much more expensive than most countries, but Peru, I noticed like their tourist tickets, everything tourist related has a huge tax on it. So I just figured, I guess everything in Peru is just more expensive that way. So I kept walking for 30 minutes and I came across like I said, that main tourist drag, Avenida El Sol, Sun Avenue. And it was really cool. They have a bunch of parks, and they have that huge sun statue that the Incan calendars are known for. I looked it up. The Intihuatana. It was in my offline maps thingy. But they have one of those large sun reliefs on a waterfall, like an artificial waterfall in the middle of this small park on that main street. And then there's even a little stone footbridge that goes behind the waterfall. So that was really cool. I didn't realize there would be so much water in this 11,200 elevation dry already country, but there were a lot of fountains and a lot of little ponds and stuff in the city. So maybe that's where all this extra tourist taxes are going, to make the city nice. But I was pretty excited to get there because I could change my money, which I did. I went inside the first currency exchange place I saw, and the currency exchange rates also seemed crazy, like really bad in the airport. So I didn't get them there. And on this main street, immediately it was 30% better rate. So I basically got 30% free money from this in-town currency exchange. And later on, I looked at other places and they were all just as good, or at least not as bad as the airport, I guess I should say. Yeah, so I got a 30% better exchange rate just by not changing my money at the airport and going into town to change my money. And that's been on my mind ever since Laos, where I made the huge mistake of changing my money at the airport, even though my friend was like, no, trust me, just go to the supermarket. It's a way better rate. And then I went to the supermarket and I think it was also like, maybe not 30%, but it was a lot more. Like I lost 20% of my exchange by doing it in the airport rather than exchanging in town, which I usually do, but I think I've just been trying to make things more convenient for myself. And I don't think I should make things that convenient because I like walking around towns anyway. I'm going to explore the first couple days. There's always currency exchange places. It just doesn't make sense to spend so much more money at the airport when all the in-town places offer a better rate and offer better goods and services. Which brings me to Claro and the data plan. So I stopped into a convenience store first after I exchanged my money, and because that convenience store accepted cards, and I got a whole bunch of stuff. I got alpaca jerky, and I got coca candy and drinks, and I tried a bunch of different chocolates, got a couple of potato chips, and a few beers, because I was happy to be in Cusco. And now I had been backpacking for 2 hours, and I had no indication of altitude sickness. I felt just the same as every other day where I backpacked around a new city. And there were a whole bunch of Incan beers to try. That's the other thing. There's 3 breweries here that I know of so far, just in Cusco. And I can go walk over and visit them, which I'm probably going to do at some point. But there are very local crafted beers here, and I was interested in trying them. So I got a few in this convenience store with the alpaca jerky, and that was good. I asked the guy at the currency exchange, oh no, it was at the convenience store, where I could find a Claro store, and he said it's right at the end of the street, and they don't open until 10. So now it was past 9, but I didn't want to wait until 10. So I just walked up the street, and a different company, Betel, was open. And I walked into Betel, and it was one of the official stores, because all their official stores are on that Avenida El Sol. And I just told the girl, hey, I want to get a SIM card and plan for a month. And she handed me the paper that had all the plans. And right there, first option was 40 soles, so like $10, includes the new SIM card, includes the setup, they'll do it there for you in the store, and includes 30 gigabytes for 30 days. So even that old lady had quoted me more than double that price, and the airport had quoted me 4 times that price. So if you go to Cusco, go to one of the local shops for your SIM card and data. So I just made sure, first of all, like, that's what it is, 40 soles. She was like, yep, easy. And I told her how much the airport was charging these days in Lima, and she was like, what? So I got it right there because, yeah, $10. And the charge on my no-fee international credit card was like 10.02 or something. And then I had my month-long 30 gigabytes card. It was so easy. They opened it, popped it in, and then it worked. I think she did have to look at my ID to write down my name for registration maybe, but it really took no time at all. And then after I had it, I was like, great, that was the only thing I was worried about for no reason that I could think of. Again, I don't know why I was so concerned about getting that data, but then I got it, so I was very happy. So Incan warriors and mountain people chewed coca leaves traditionally because the cocaine inside, the coca, gave them energy and reduced altitude sickness. And in Peru and Cusco, they have tons of like coca teas and coca candies with a little bit of coca inside. And people say, I haven't looked into it too much, but people say that it is real coca in there that cocaine is derived from, so you'll fail drug tests if you take that tea and candy. Luckily, I don't have to worry about that. And I ate a bunch of that candy and drank a bunch of that tea. The candy does remind me of cocaine a little bit. It's like a earthy cocaine taste, but I don't know if I would place that if I didn't know it was coca. Like, I don't know if I would have. It tastes more like tea to me than like cocaine specifically. That taste you get in the back of your throat after doing cocaine, which I did a couple times, not a huge fan of, by the way. But I had that little taste when I ate this coca candy. But again, it tasted probably more just like regular tea leaves than like cocaine at all. And I didn't try either of the candy or the tea until the next day because I wanted to see if I got any symptoms of altitude sickness, but I never did. And I ended up backpacking through Cusco for a long time, for 6 hours in total, because by the time I got my new SIM card, it was like 10 maybe. And so I got I had my alpaca jerky and my chips and my beer from that convenience store, and I had my card, so I was like, okay, now I'm set up for the month because my apartment's just waiting for me. So I walked up the street and just looked around, and there are some great views from the center of town. I can see why that's the most popular street. The mountains around Cusco are very nice. They're not super lush. They're kind of scrubby, but they're very pretty. And they just have this, again, local, they have a real, they feel like real mountains. I don't know how to explain this well enough. They feel like they're scraping the top of the world. And so all the sheen of modern civilization, it hasn't gotten to them yet. The mountains still feel relatively untouched. Even though there are roads and paths and stuff that go up there, but they just feel so rustic and real, these Cusco mountains. And I like them, and I'll get to that soon enough, I'm sure. But anyway, I was walking up the road, marveling at the mountains, and then also marveling at the green parks in the middle of what I assumed would be very desolate, dry, undeveloped town. But at least that popular touristy spot, there was tons of green parks and a lot of benches to sit on and trees and all that kind of stuff. And I just sat down on a brick wall or a stone wall under a tree and popped open a beer. And I don't even know if that's legal, but it seems like all these countries are just like, yeah, as long as you're cool about it, it's fine. So I opened the beer and I opened the alpaca jerky. And then I was like, whoa, because the alpaca jerky was so good. And it was just very simple. After it tasted so good, I looked at the back and it was like 4 ingredients. It was alpaca meat, soy sauce. I don't even know if there was vinegar in it, and salt. It was like 4 things, which I make my own jerky, and I make it very simply as well. I use the meat, soy sauce, and brown sugar, and that's it. And this alpaca jerky tasted like my jerky that I like to make. The soy sauce, I feel like it was strong, so I didn't taste as much of the alpaca, but it wasn't too strong, so it was just like soy sauce. It just tasted like great jerky, and it was absolutely delicious. And if there was a bigger bag, I would have bought a bigger bag of the alpaca jerky. And man, from that first bite, I was just kind of loving life, just chilling out, Cusco, Peru, high altitude, perfectly healthy, enjoying this beer. Actually, the first beer I had was the Dorada Negra, which is like the black beer of a local company, Cusqueña, and it was Cusqueña Negra. The other ones are Dorada and Triga, which is a golden and then a wheat and then the black one that I had, and that one was not that good, but I drank it. And I also got the Dorada, which is just the regular lager, and that was pretty tasty. All the Cusco beers are pretty good. And I was just trying all my snacks, the potato chips and jerky and whatever else, and I looked over and there was this old grandma making something for this younger, pretty girl, and it looked like one of those obvious breakfast foods, like there's someone on the side of the road, they make the breakfast. And I noticed that she was making avocado, and then there was onions and tomato, and I was like, what? And I got up and walked over to look at him, and the girl looked up at me, and the grandma said hello, and I was like, hey, what is this? And I started talking in Spanish, and then the girl spoke really good English and just explained to me that this is pan con aguacate. So it's just a little muffin bread cut in half, kind of English muffin consistency, maybe a little softer or fluffier. And then avocado. So the lady takes out an avocado, cuts in half, takes out half the avocado, puts in diced onion, diced tomato, smashes it all up so you get a nice little paste, guacamole basically. And then she puts on spices, a little bit of cheese, and any sauce you want, and pan con aguacate. And it's 2.5 soles, so it's like 75 cents or whatever. But man, it looked so good. The bread, the avocado, everything looked super fresh. And I was like, yep, give me one of those. That looks way too good not to eat right now. And I'm just hanging out. And the girl talked to me and asked me what I was doing, and I'm a tourist, and her name was Rue, and we talked. And then she went on her way to her job or whatever. And I got that pan con aguacate, and it was the best sandwich I've had in so long. It was absolutely delicious. It was as fresh as it looked. Like, it was as fresh as I imagined. Everything was incredibly fresh. Like, the green of the avocado was crazy when she was mixing it up, and then she puts in the onions and tomatoes after, and such a simple meal too, and of course very healthy. Delicious, delicious breakfast. I haven't gotten another one yet because I'm not usually out. I'm usually sleeping really late. I don't get out in the morning a lot, but I got every street food that looked good while I walked. But that first one, I had the first bite of pan con aguacate, and I was like, oh, I'm going to like it here. Like, if this is the traditional style of food that everybody's just like, yeah, that's what we eat here. We eat delicious, super fresh food. And I will say, I do like that about high elevation places also. High elevation, low humidity, food lasts a lot longer, and it just tastes crisper. Like, even my potato chips, when I get potato chips, those will stay fresh for days, even if they're not too securely closed up and airtight. Food just seems to stay fresh longer at these higher elevations. But that sandwich was so good. And I was like, this is what I'm doing. And I went back and sat down under my tree. And by halfway through the sandwich, which isn't huge, maybe the size of my hand, I was halfway done and I was like, I should get another one. Because also it was 70 cents, so why not? But I looked over and the lady had, everything was in a shawl. And so the bucket with avocado and then onions and everything. So she just put a lid on top of everything, like a small bucket that held everything, or two buckets, and then whipped that up in her shawl, tied it around her, and started walking up the road. So I guess she goes up and down the road and, makes a sandwich here and there. And she was already a few feet away walking up the road, and I still had half a sandwich. I was like, whatever, one's enough, and I'll probably see someone else. And I finished my sandwich, and a couple cops went by, and I was drinking my beer, and I was like, this is probably fun. They didn't say anything. Well, they didn't say anything about the beer, but they were talking about the tree, and the guy was saying something about a fruit or something, and he picked out a couple of these berries from the tree I was sitting under, and I was curious, so I asked him, sorry, what kind of fruit is that? And he said, it's kapuli. So it'll be ready in about 2 months. They're not quite there yet, but in 2 months, all of these kapuli, you can eat them. And I was like, oh, cool. Thanks, man. And he was like, you like Cusco? And you just saw the regular questions. And I was like, yup. You like pan con aguacate? Oh, it's great. It's a great sandwich. Good, good. Oh, and there was this older lady sitting next to me after, 5 or 10 minutes. She sat down on the wall next to me, the retaining wall of the park, and she kept staring at this map, and she looked kind of confused. But I don't know, there's something where someone like needs help, and then I will offer to help them. But sometimes it doesn't seem like they need help, so I won't. Because I don't like too much help if someone's like, no, let me take you to that restaurant or take you to that supermarket. I can show you exactly what, no. I don't like that much as a traveler anyway. This lady didn't seem like she needed help. She just looked sort of confused, but she was in the main tourist center, so she certainly wasn't lost. And she was a white lady with curly hair, so I assumed, because she was also wearing big hiking boots and convertible pants and just all the touristiest stuff from the States. So I assumed that she was American. She was just confused because all of these words are different, which is how most tourists feel when they get to a new place. And I was still like, oh, maybe you should just check if she's okay. And then that same police officer said something to her, and she spoke back fluent Spanish. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm glad I didn't try to help because I would have sounded like an idiot. She's fine if she speaks fluent Spanish. And she just asked the guy, where's this museum? And the cop was like, right around the corner over there. So she was just trying to figure out when the museum was open. Things were fine. No one needed my help. So I finished my alpaca jerky that I had taken to eat just a little bit every minute so I could really stretch it out. And I finished my pan con aguacate, which was also very delicious. And I could either go northeast toward a few spots I had marked on my offline maps, but most of the museums here are like history museums, and I read a bunch of I read a lot of the history on my Wiki Voyage like travel article things. So I'm not crazy about going to a lot of museums. I'm trying to not feel guilty about saying that I don't want to go to a lot of the museums in Cusco, but I don't. They had recreations of a lot of Incan tools in a huge glass display case in the airport, and I was like, awesome. That's perfect. That's enough for me of prehistory Incan artifacts. Like when I landed in Fairbanks, Alaska, and they have the huge polar bears, taxidermied polar bears, I'm like, great. I don't have to go to the museum showing me taxidermied polar bears now. I'll go to modern art museums. I am really curious about how art is developing in a country because it is different everywhere. But a lot of these are, this is what the Incan wall looks like. But if you walk to Plaza de Armas, there's the Incan wall. And these are Incan artifacts, but I saw those in the airport in that cool display. So rather than going to the museums, I decided to meander toward my Airbnb and just walk slowly. And since I got the pan con aguacate, I was like, I should get more local foods because I'm not usually up during the morning or lunchtime. There's going to be a bunch of interesting snacks that I don't usually get. I did stop by the convenience store and got a couple more beers, I think, for my walk. It was going to take, 90 minutes or something to get to the Airbnb. I again chose a place kind of outside of the center of the city, pretty far outside the center of the city. So I started my walk. Oh, right before I left that wall, there was like this huge group of high school students all walking down the street. I think they were high school students. And I noticed that a lot of them were wearing bucket hats like mine. And that's a pretty good indication of how strong the actual sun is when the locals are wearing sunscreen, which is pretty uncommon in most countries. And it was specifically the lighter-skinned locals. So they were all kids from one school, obviously. They're all speaking to each other in Spanish. And I noticed that some of them were wearing bucket hats, maybe 5 to 10% of the entire group. Most of them weren't wearing sun protection. But then I noticed that all of the kids wearing bucket hats were significantly lighter skinned than the other locals. So apparently, even in Peru, even if you grew up here, people are like, yeah, you better have some kind of sun protection. It felt pretty okay in the morning, but as soon as it was hitting like 10:30, 11, the sun also made itself felt. It's no wonder the sun god is so big here, Inti, because the glare of the sun is so apparent. It's so powerful here in Cusco. I would be worshiping the sun too if I grew up here. It's a fascinating place. It's a fascinating sunlight here. So I was already pretty interested that even the locals were wearing bucket hats because, like I said, it is super rare for locals to have a lot of sun protection in most countries I've been to, even tropical places. But the sunlight in Cusco does feel different. And then the last thing I saw before I left, I was finishing like my last beer and the last bite of jerky I had or whatever it was, and my eyes locked on to this kid wearing a poncho because it was an alpaca-themed poncho. So there was 2 giant alpaca on the front and 2 on the back, and then the rest of it was in these crazy psychedelic Peruvian colors, which is the color style they have here in Peru. And it was like the coolest poncho I've ever seen. My first thought was like, get up and talk to that kid about that poncho. But my Spanish isn't great, so it would have been a very awkward conversation. And the poncho was so amazing that all of my focus and attention was taken up just by staring at it. There was so much to see within the poncho that I was just like, wow. And I was like, that's really cool. Oh, there's varying thickness in the borderline. Oh, interesting. Oh, and the alpaca ears. Like I was just noticing all of this stuff as this kid was walking by, or maybe a 30-year-old But the poncho was mesmerizing, and I just stared at it. My head oscillated as he walked by, and I was like, I want that poncho so bad. And then he was gone. And so I didn't get to talk to him, but that is the coolest poncho I've probably ever seen. I went to an alpaca show in Denver and got these great alpaca socks, and I do like alpaca socks a lot. And then I have that cool alpaca wool hat. And I certainly don't have room for a poncho in my luggage at all, but if I was ever going to get a poncho, I would get that poncho exactly. When I was staring at it and I was like locked on, my brain was like, yeah, that's your poncho. That's you. And it felt like me. So I started walking away. It was now past 10 a.m. and I had told the people I was going to check in at 11 a.m. So I sent off a quick message that I would actually probably arrive by 1 p.m. because I figured I'd take a couple hours. It would be a long meandering walk eastward. And I was right. It turned out to be a long meandering walk eastward for fun because now that I had had the good food and the good beer and it was such a nice day and the comfortable temperature. Oh, I did make sure I put on sunscreen and I also put on my sun sleeves so that I wouldn't get burned at all. But the temperature is still so low that it was not hot and I wasn't sweating. It was just so comfortable to walk around with my rucksack in this city, and I could keep my eye out for any good breakfast or lunch foods that were going on. So I got that other beer, and then I started heading my way east, and I went down the first street, and that same old grandma who sold me the pan con aguacate, who had walked off with her shawl, was down that street sitting next to another old grandma, and the two of them were talking. And I was like, oh, otra vez, quiero otra pan con aguacate. I want another one of those. And I got another one, and she was happy. And I gave her back the 2.5 soles because I gave her a 5, and she gave me 2.5 back, and I gave her that 2.5 back, so I get my second sandwich. That sandwich is so good. And I actually saved that second one. I didn't eat it. I figured if I saved it, then the avocado would like melt into the bread more and make the bread more mushy with avocado. And that worked. When I got home, I ate it like a few hours later, and it was a little bit softer. Oh, so good. That sandwich is fantastic. Fresh or after a few hours, it stays great. It's great. It's great. There was a Chinese-looking family I saw walking down the street, standing in front of a Chinese restaurant. Oh, that was interesting. All the Chinese restaurants here are called Chifa, not China, but an F instead of an N. And they looked pretty lost and confused. So I spoke to them in Spanish first, and it was a young guy with his two parents, I think. And the younger guy was like, no Spanish, English, please. And so I was like, Putonghua, can you speak Mandarin? And he was like, yeah. And so I spoke in Mandarin, but I've been studying Spanish so much lately that my Mandarin, I kept breaking it up with Spanish. And I was like, oh, geez, okay, maybe I'll just speak English. I've been studying so much Spanish lately that I'm mixing up the words right now. And he pointed down at my beer, and he was like, that's probably not helping either. And I was like, yeah, that's true. That's probably not helping either. And I just told him they were looking for a Chinese restaurant. They wanted to go to that one. It wasn't open yet. And I told them a couple other ones that I had seen while walking up into the city. And he was actually American from New York. So it was fun. We talked for a little bit, but his parents were just standing by waiting for him to get back to them and take them to a restaurant. So we said goodbye, and I went on my way. I ambled on some more. I tried one of the coca candies. And like I said, the taste was tea-ish with maybe a little cocaine in there. And the further away I got from the city center and the airport, the less beeping there was. So there might just be some hotspots. People do honk here more than Medellin, but once I was outside of the city center, it didn't seem like a crazy amount of beeping and honking. But you know what else was really nice? That because of the high elevation and the cooler temperature, there was a lot more fashion going on than I expected to see. Like, I liked seeing all the scarves and the ponchos and the multiple layers of sweaters and long sleeve shirts. There was so many more things that everybody could wear because it was a cooler temperature, but not cold, so you didn't need to bundle up really or wear heavy overcoats. You could just wear multiple layers of interesting looking clothing. And in Peru, a lot of the Peruvian colors are psychedelic. They're like bright blue and pink and purple and orange. So there's a lot of really cool dresses and scarves here and shawls and ponchos and hats. That's cool too. The traditional Peruvian hat looks like an Indiana Jonesy hat, kind of, with a flat top. I don't know how to call it. Yeah, I'm not sure what they're called, and I can't find a good picture or reference right now. But all of the grandmas that are selling food on the street or selling alpaca wool goods on the street all have the same brimmed, it's like a short brimmed hat, kind of tall with a flat top on it, and it looks cool, especially with all their shawls and long sleeve psychedelic colors and everything. Just looks cool. And all the Peruvian grandmas have long pigtails, and some of them tie the pigtails together. So instead of two pigtails going down in the back, it's this one circular connected braid because they tie the ends of the braids together around their back. I really liked that. I thought that looked really cool. And then all the younger people are wearing slightly more hip, flowy, voluminous clothing and fashion accessories. So I kept walking down the street and just heading eastward, and I didn't see too many other things. I looked at a couple convenience stores and just looked at the local snacks. And I did come across this lady boiling quail eggs, and she put some in a bag and put something in the bag and then gave it to someone. And I was like, that looks delicious. So I got a little pouch of the quail eggs, and it turns out what she put in, she asked if I wanted it, and I was like, what is it? And she says, oh, it's from Cocopito, or Copoquito, I think. And I was like, nope, I don't know what that is. So yes, I do want some, please. And she put in this like orangey yellow mixed vegetable diced something. I have no idea what it was. And she put it in there and mixed it up and then gave it to me with a toothpick. And it turns out it was a horseradish sauce. And I love quail eggs already. I think quail eggs are fantastic. But with this horseradish sauce, it was like the best snack breakfast food I could conceive of. It was delicious. I was sad I only got one pouch. And I was going to get more. But again, these grandmas, they only stay until they like make a sale, and then they sling their shawl with everything in over their shoulder and walk away. So I was eating. I was like, man, this is so good. And a guy and his daughter came up to get a little bag of it also. And he spoke fluent English. He was, very good at English, but he was a local from Cusco. And he asked me what I was doing there, and we talked a little bit. And I told his daughter I liked her hat. It was very cool. She had one of those grandma-style hats with the flat top and everything, and a little band of psychedelic colors around it. And it was super cool. And it was really cute, and she was wearing like a little tutu dress. And I complimented her fashion sense. And he was wearing like a cool New York cut, like sick coat also. He looked slick. But we talked for a little bit, and I had eaten a couple of the eggs, and I was like, man, I gotta get another order of this. And I turned around, and that lady had slung on her shawl, and I was like, whoa. And she was already like a block away. It was so fast. And I was like, I'll just get it next time. I'm not going to run down the street screaming for the egg lady to come back, please. Although it is a fun mental image. But I said it was nice to talk to the dad, and then I went on my way. Oh, and that was funny though, because the dad gave me the first, but what are you doing here? Because I always get my Airbnbs or apartments outside of the city, never on the main roads. And I was close. I was like an hour into my walk at this point. I had just been going around. I stopped in one place and got some dried mango and hung out on the side of the road eating the dried mango and tried to gauge like how often I'd be able to use my credit card versus having to get cash, because I didn't have a ton of cash left over from Medellin. And if I was only going to be in Peru a month, I didn't want to pay ATM fees if I didn't have to, because I knew I would have to use the cash to buy the tourist ticket for all the sites. A lot of unique things about Peru and Cusco in general, or Cusco and Peru in general. But that first day I bought all the snacks with cash because whatever. So between eating all these snacks, I was an hour into my eastward journey. I was maybe half an hour away from the apartment. It was noon 30 at this point, and I let them know I'd be there in half an hour. But because I was so far out of the city center, that dad was like, "Oh, okay, and you're visiting Cusco. Yeah. For how long? Oh, a month or so probably. Wow, cool. What are you doing here, though, in this neighborhood?" I guess a lot of people are comfortable around other tourists. Like, it's that first time traveling thing. If you don't travel very often, it seems like, well, even me, right? I was so worried about getting data for some reason, even though it was absurd how many phone stores there were. There are probably more phone stores than anywhere, anything else, any other type of store in the country. Every 4 stores was another Claro or Beatel or Entel, like another phone store, so I had nothing to worry about. But even me, having been to whatever 40 countries, I was still like, ooh, I have to make sure to get my data. Like, I'll never be able to find it. For some reason, I just forget how easy it is to find everything in any country, even though I've done it 40 times in a row. So, yeah, there's that tendency to stick to the middle of the city where all the services definitely, they're even on Google. And all these, like I said, I couldn't find anything on Google for the data for phone stores, but the whole east of the city basically has nothing on Google for phone stores. But if you're walking, every 4 stores are another phone store. And when I finally got to my apartment that I was renting, literally across the street was a giant authorized distributor. And then there were 2 more authorized distributor stores on the way to a supermarket that I walk to like almost every day. And I just told the dad, I was like, I just like to be outside of the city center, more local culture. And he was like, yeah, it's cool. This is a cool city. And it is. I like Cusco. It is a cool city. So after that little interaction, I kept walking and just kept my eye out for any other snacks that I needed to get. But I don't think anything really caught me that first day after that, because I already got 2 avocado sandwiches, the dried mango, like a big bag of that, the alpaca jerky, those eggs. I had like a whole bunch of snacks. So I kept going and I looked around and it was interesting. And as I got further out from the city center, it was apparent like, oh, this is more local economic level. Like, it's a lot poorer out here, but it's still extremely functional. Like, there is public transportation. There are buses everywhere. Oh, the buses, right. Those are cool because some of their names are Batman. Instead of like on the F line or the B line, there's a bus company called Batman. So it's the Batman line. And I don't know why exactly, but some of the buses are Batman. There's one other one that has a funny name, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. But the Batman one's cool because it has the Batman logo and then just says Batman in super bold letters. And then it takes you all the tourist crap. I actually haven't ridden a bus yet. They all look really packed, and I've only been exploring my neighborhood so far, but I will have to take one tomorrow because, or soon. I'm going to go to the Plaza de Armas because it has the 12-sided Incan stone. So Incans are known for their architecture because their stone walls and their stone buildings, they use very large stones that fit together perfectly and are extremely stable. Like, they go through many earthquakes without any trouble. They're not going to fall apart. They're kind of like the pyramids. They fit so well together. And there's one original stone that's particularly interesting in the Plaza de Armas, which is like the main tourist plaza in Cusco, the 12-sided stone. So it's not just cubes. They cut the stones so they fit exactly wherever they fit. And I'm very interested to go see that. But the Plaza de Armas is on the west side of town. I'm on the east side of town. So I'll either have to walk for 2.5 hours, 2 hours, or take a bus. And I'll probably take a bus. There are a lot of ruins, supposedly, right around or even in the city, though, so I'm going to hike to a couple of those tomorrow first, the ones that are closer to me, on foot, and just see what they look like first, if they are ruins, if they are like original stonework, or I don't know what they are. There's a whole bunch of so-called ruins or archaeological sites within city limits on my offline maps, and so I'll probably explore that tomorrow. Maybe I will walk all the way to Armas. Who knows? So I didn't find any more quail eggs with horseradish sauce, but that's okay, because 5 with horseradish, that's a good snack. But I did see this lady with a glass cabinet, looked like the other ones where it's selling food on the side of the street and you have the glass cabinet. And she was just cleaning the cabinet and then lift up the rag and spit on it and then kept cleaning it. And I was like, okay, now I'm going to remember that the rest of the time I'm here, that to clean their cabinets, some people spit on them. And then I got to my apartment, and boy howdy, it looked big when I rented it. I was like, that's probably a little too big. And it is. It's huge. It's $360 per month. I should probably talk about it because Airbnb, this is how you can live abroad for under $500 a month. Very well. I wouldn't have got it if I knew this apartment was this big. But so there's a living room, and just the living room is 3 times as large as it was a tiny studio I had in Medellin. Before Medellin was Panama. Actually, that room was even tinier. I think the living room here is 4 times the size of my tiny Medellin shared apartment. Or my tiny Panama shared apartment. 3 times as big as my Medellin apartment. Twice as big as my Guatemala apartment. This apartment might be bigger than the house I rented in India. It's huge. So I have a giant living room, and then a huge kitchen that's bigger than all of those apartments I mentioned. A large washing area with a washing machine, all of that. I have 3 full bedrooms, each of those bedrooms is also larger than any of the past 3 apartments I have. And 2 bathrooms with showers. Full chest of drawers, wardrobes in each bedroom. Huge gate out front. There's a trash collection area, so I can put my trash out there. Floor to ceiling windows that I can look out over the southern part of the city. It's huge. It is a very large apartment. But that's the great thing about Airbnb. You can rent giant places. I usually choose a little smaller, but this was that weird Airbnb thing where my first host was really weird and then canceled my reservation. So Airbnb helped me find another one, and then that one was also no good. So they helped me find this one. And it cost the same, $360 a month, but it's just incredibly enormous. And there's no rugs or tapestries on the walls or anything, so I have to use a comforter from one of the 2 extra beds that I have over a couple of chairs to make my little studio here for better sound. But yeah, it's great. It's nice to have a giant space just for fun. And I can, text my friends and family just well, you're not going to believe this new place. This is crazy. And one of the bedrooms has a hardwood floor. That's the one I'm making my base in. And then there's hardwood floor looking tile around everything. It's either very nice tile or hardwood floor in this apartment. Everything's really nice. It's all, the kitchen and bathrooms are all completely tile and new. It looks like new tile. Oh, huge flat screen TVs. I was actually going to buy an HDMI cable just so I could play Silk Song, a video game, on the giant TV in the living room, but I'm too lazy to walk over there from my, that's the other problem of having a giant apartment. My bedroom's actually so far away from the living room, I don't want to carry my laptop out there to play it every time. So I'm probably not going to get the HDMI cable to hook up to the giant TV. There is a smaller still large flat screen in this bedroom. But whatever, my laptop's fine anyway. So to settle me into the apartment, the host wasn't here, which is common. They usually have like a helper. And Percy was the helper, and he showed me around the apartment, which was really just like, this is a bedroom. And I was like, cool. And then he took me to the second bedroom. He's like, this, another bedroom. Then the third bedroom, he's like, this is a bedroom too. Here's a bathroom. Come with me. This is a bathroom. And that's the kind of tour it was. But he seemed like a really nice guy. He really reminded me of those potato people in the new Dark Crystal movie, like Hup. It was really funny talking to him. But when he found out that I was an English teacher, immediately he was like, oh, so you can teach me English. And I was like, I have to not tell people I'm an English teacher anymore. Because I'm not an English teacher, but it like freaks people out if they see me and I'm like, no, I'm retired. I don't really work much anymore. So you work online? No, I just like don't work a lot. I saved my money in China. I invested. It's always awkward to explain that. So I have to find some job that makes sense that I can just say, and then people will be like, okay. And they'll stop asking me after that. Because English teacher happened in Panama, happened in Guatemala. It happens very consistently that if I say I'm an English teacher, then the person is like, oh, then you should teach me English. It's like, oh yeah, I'm a chef. Oh, okay, you can come to my house and cook for me. Well, no. But I just told him like, no, this is completely vacation time for me. I'm not doing any teaching anymore. Thank you though. And he was like, oh. That's the other thing. When I tell people I don't want to teach English, they're confused, as if because I'm an English teacher, I would love to be teaching all of the time. But he was super nice. That was on me because I could have said anything else. I could have said I'm a writer or anything, and they would have been like, oh, okay, and ignored it. But when you tell someone you're an English teacher, and you're a fluent English speaker, people from non-English speaking countries get really excited about that. And that was it. Now I was in Cusco in my giant mansion apartment, ready to explore the city, I guess, which I'll get into the next episode. It started with me pulling the doorknob off of the door. Whoops. Hope you're having a great day. You can talk to me at bitofarambler@gmail.com or bitofarambler on Lemmy and Blue Sky.